Step into the past like never before. These are not just old black and white photographs lost to time. These are the real faces of Confederacy, now restored in vivid color. Using advanced artificial intelligence and historical research, we've breathed new life into rare portraits of Southern soldiers, men who fought, endured, and bore the weight of a divided nation. Each image tells a story of sacrifice, of loyalty, of human experience during one of the most turbulent periods in American history. From fresh-faced farm boys to hardened veterans, from rural Tennessee to the battlefields of Georgia, we reveal the humanity behind the uniforms, not myths, but men. These colorized portraits don't glorify, they illuminate. They bring you face-to-face with the past. Alexander Swift, Sandy Pendleton, Confederate staff officer 1840 to 1864. Born near Alexandria, Virginia, Alexander Sandy Pendleton was raised in the Shenandoah Valley and educated at Washington College and the University of Virginia, preparing for a life in the ministry until war changed everything. When Virginia seceded in 1861, Pendleton joined the Confederate cause, quickly catching the eye of General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, who took him on as a trusted aide. Described as smart, tireless, and meticulous, Sandy became Jackson's right-hand man during the 1862 Shenandoah Valley Campaign, later earning promotion to major and eventually lieutenant colonel and chief of staff. After Jackson's death, Pendleton continued serving under Generals Ewell and Early, fighting at Antietam, Fredericksburg, and in the 1864 Shenandoah Valley Campaign. On September 22, 1864, during a retreat at Fisher's Hill, he was mortally wounded while rallying fleeing troops. He died the next day in Woodstock, just days shy of his 24th birthday. Pendleton is buried in Lexington, Virginia, near his former commander, Stonewall Jackson. Two lives cut short, forever linked by war. Private Hugh Gilbert, Company B, 50th Alabama Infantry. Gilbert, born and raised in Giles County, Tennessee, enlisted on September 3, 1861 in Gilbertsboro, Limestone County, Alabama. Giles County and Limestone County sit opposite each other on the Alabama/Tennessee state line. Hugh served with many of his Gilbert cousins who also served in the 50th. He was slightly wounded on December 31st, 1862 at the Battle of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, crossing the first cornfield, according to his military records. He was killed on July 22, 1864, during the Battle of Atlanta, Georgia. His family retrieved his body and buried him in the family plot in Giles County, Tennessee. Private Seaborn Harrison Bezy, Coosa Volunteers, Company B, 12th Alabama Infantry. Bezy, a resident of Tallapoosa County, enlisted on June 17, 1861. He was captured on September 14, 1862 at the Battle of South Mountain during the Sharpsburg Campaign. Like most soldiers, he was absent due to illness a few times during his enlistment. He was wounded, shot in the left knee, and captured in April 1865 in the closing days of the war. Bezy survived the war, married, worked as a farmer, and died in 1909 in Tallapoosa County, Alabama, where he is buried. Captain Lafayette Paradise, Company D, 34th Alabama Infantry. Paradise, age 27, enlisted as a first lieutenant on March 6, 1862 in Tallapoosa County, Alabama, and later became captain. He became sick and was first in a hospital in Tupelo, Mississippi, then sent home, then returned to his regiment. He was sick yet again during the Kentucky campaign and was left in Harrisburg, Kentucky in October 1862, and he died shortly thereafter, probably in Kentucky. Private Henry Preston Rosser, Company D, 7th Alabama Cavalry CS, and Shockley's Independent Cavalry Company. Rosser's records are hard to piece together, but it appears he first enlisted on June 20th, 1863 in Greene County, Alabama, but deserted 7 days later. It then appears that he joined Shockley's company in Montgomery, Alabama, in April 1864. Rosser survived the war, died in 1920, and is buried in Cass County, Texas. Captain John Elmore Hall, Company B, 59th Alabama Infantry. Hall was a student at the University of Alabama in 1860. When the war began, he enlisted in the Independent Rifles. Company E, 6th Alabama Infantry, to serve for 12 months. He was commissioned as a lieutenant in Hilliard's Legion at that time and eventually became captain of Company B, 59th Alabama Infantry, when Hilliard's Legion disbanded. He was wounded in the left shoulder in the closing days of the war and was still in the hospital when the war ended. Hall survived the war, died in 1882, and is buried in Elmore County, Alabama. Colonel James Jackson, Jr., 27th Alabama Infantry, with his wife Elizabeth and one of his daughters. Jackson, born in Nashville, first enlisted in the Lauderdale Volunteer Dragoons, Company H, 4th Alabama Infantry. He was wounded at the Battle of First Manassas in July 1861. Upon recovering, he organized the 27th Alabama Infantry and was elected lieutenant colonel. He became a POW in Fort Donelson. Tennessee capitulated to federal forces in February 1862, but he was later exchanged. He was seriously wounded at Kennesaw Mountain, Georgia in 1864, resulting in the amputation of his arm. He commanded a brigade at Bentonville just before the war ended. After the war, he worked as a planner and probate clerk. Jackson died in 1879 and is buried in Lauderdale County, Alabama. An unknown member of the Calhoun Guards, Company I, 9th Alabama Infantry. Speculation on the identification of images that are actually not identified can be difficult. Other images give enough clues, such as this. This soldier is armed in the exact same manner as several other images of men in the 9th Alabama, including the shotgun and fighting knife. Members of the 27th Alabama had a very similar pose, but they had de-guard knives. So, we may never know his name, but we know he served in the 9th Alabama Infantry. Private Lrand Franklin Brown, King's Guard, Company K, 23rd Alabama Infantry. Brown, born in Georgia, was a 17-year-old student when he enlisted on September 27, 1861, in Montgomery, Alabama. Unfortunately, he does not have many military records, and what is ends in 1863. Brown was in Montgomery, Alabama, when the war ended. On April 3, 1865, he got married, and he received a parole on April 13, 1865. His life was short. He died sometime before 1870 when he was in his mid-20s. Private James A. Turner, Company C, 51st Alabama Cavalry Partisan Rangers. Turner, born in South Carolina in 1823, was a married farmer with 3 daughters living in Randolph County, Alabama in 1860. He enlisted in Talladega, Alabama on April 20, 1862. He traveled 70 miles to enlist, and his horse was valued at $275. He was surrendered at the end of the war on May 19, 1865 in Talladega, Alabama. Turner died in 1892 and is buried in Calhoun County, Alabama. Private Francis Parnell Dean, Southern Foresters, Company I, 12th Alabama Infantry. Dean enlisted on June 9, 1861 in Mobile, Alabama. Born in Clark County, Alabama, he had moved to Jackson County, Mississippi by 1860. When the war started, he went across the state line and enlisted in Alabama for reasons unknown. He was wounded, shot in the wrist, at the Battle of Sharpsburg on September 17, 1862. In 1865, he was captured March 25, 1865 during the attack on Fort Stedman. Dean survived the war, died in 1925, and is buried in George County, Mississippi. General Sterling Alexander Martinwood and his staff. The man standing on the far right is Dr. William Cordwell Cross, brigade surgeon. He appears to be wearing an Alabama map on tree-sword belt plate, seated left to right. General Sterling Alexander Martinwood, and his brother seated right, Henry Clay Wood, who served as an aide-de-camp. Standing back row, left to right, possibly Martin Van Burenwald, AQM. The man standing center is possibly Alexander Lockett Hamilton, chaplain, 16th Alabama Infantry, and on the left is Cross. Private Squire Hagen Burgess, Company I, 15th Alabama Infantry, a 19-year-old single farmer. He enlisted on July 3rd, 1861 in Troy, Alabama. Aside from instances of illness, He was present the entire war and surrendered at Appomattox. He died in 1916 and is buried in Pike County, Alabama. Private William Parker Lloyd, Dickinson Guards, Company G, 32nd Alabama Infantry. Lloyd enlisted on April 5, 1862 in Grove Hill, Clark County, Alabama. He was captured on October 7, 1862 at Lrand, Tennessee, only to be paroled 2 days later. In early 1863, he was absent sick. Then he in turn served as a nurse for a time at Buckner Hospital in Cherokee Springs, Georgia. Lloyd survived the war and died in 1905 in Brazos County, Texas. Private Benjamin Robert Bryan, Company C, 37th Alabama Infantry. Bryan enlisted on April 2, 1862 in Leon, Alabama. He was killed on June 11, 1863 during the siege of Vicksburg, Mississippi. Private Elias Wyight, Company H, 37th Alabama Infantry. Wright enlisted on August 29, 1862 in Lawrenceville, Alabama. He became a POW when Vicksburg, Mississippi capitulated to federal forces in July 1863, but he was soon paroled. His wife Susan died in 1864, leaving their 6 children destitute. Elias wrote a letter attempting to be discharged from the military early in 1865, but the war soon ended. Wright died in 1897 and is buried in Hartford, Geneva County, Alabama. Thank you for traveling back in time with us. If you found this glimpse into Civil War history meaningful, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing. More forgotten faces await restoration and remembrance.